Today we're going to be talking about the NECA Shin Godzilla original release and reissue release. Oh boy. And before we move any further, here is reissue Shin Godzilla's poster box. It's simple. It's not all that short, but it's sweet and to the point. The solid red Shin Godzilla poster is one of my favorite Godzilla posters out there just because of how simple it is. And to see that recreated as a box for a figure, I'm hyped. I like that. It's cool. That's pretty much all I have to say. Moving on. So first off, as we do, NECAthon norm, let's take a look at the original release. This is the first print, first wave, if you will, of NECA Shin Godzilla figures. I made sure that I got this as soon as I possibly could. And while the likeness can be a little botched looking in some areas, I still very much do support what I said in my SH Monster Arts Shin Godzilla reissue review. I still think NECA got the paint job on this guy pretty down pat. We've got red in between what feels like just knots of skin on Shin Godzilla's chest. We've got it all over the crotch, the thighs, the shins, a bit on the feet as well. We've got it on the face. We've got it on the neck. It might be more clumpier in some areas than I would have liked. But overall, the red was very much visible. It's all mostly red with some oranges thrown in there for good measure. And yeah, it looks like Shin Godzilla. Varying degrees of quality, I will say. The tip of the tail is looking rather fantastic. I'm not exactly sure why we have cheesy poofs on this thing. I remember this being a pretty big, what the hell is going on here, NECA? But ayo, the paint is there, the detail is there, there's a decent balance of such on most of the tail. Sometimes it gets a little bit more red than it really needs to be. And I guess the best way I can really communicate what I'm about to say next is just that Shin Godzilla looks charred. It looks like he has red energy emanating from below his charred lava-like skin, and that's really just the bucket to the head on this one. The bucket to the head, huh? I don't know. It certainly beats whatever the f was, or in this guy's case wasn't, going on with SH Monster Arts because, yuck. Bandai fumble. Bandai fumble.
Bandai fumble.
The major off point being Shin Godzilla. He looks like Shin Godzilla, but I feel like he could have looked a little bit more like Shin Godzilla. I feel like they had to widen Shin Godzilla's head up a little bit and maybe shorten his snout. The one thing I will give Bandai over NECA is just that Bandai had access to those CGI renders. NECA, I believe, did not at this point in time, and it is kind of obvious. He's a little goofy. I mean, again, he does look like Shin Godzilla, but the eye placement and everything, mostly in terms of just paint, it's a little on the wonky side. This is just one of those instances earlier on in NECA's career run with Godzilla, where I feel like they really were nearly there with this guy. I don't know if anybody's even going to remember this, but when this figure was first originally unveiled to us Godzilla fans, to the public, whenever, wherever, the figure we have today isn't what was shown off. In fact, I think what we had prior actually looked a little bit better. I mean, his face is still kind of long as shit. But I don't know. I really can't put my finger on it. And with the retooling done to the figure, it almost feels like half of it belongs to the new sculpted head and other areas, and then the other half doesn't. Somewhat of a Frankenstein's figure deal going on there. But I might just be reading a little too far into it. I've done it before. We all have. I'm just stating my opinion. I think the original version of this figure looked better, and I wouldn't mind owning that one day. It'll never happen, but I wouldn't mind it. To finish up talking about paint and detail, I really am a fan of how the dorsal fins were done. The glowing, growing red just climbing up the dorsal fins. With a myriad of different reds and oranges on his back, this feels right. This looks cool. I really dig this. And the dorsal fins aren't painted up like a cheap figure either, like some other iterations of NECA's Shin Godzilla. However, Shin Godzilla not having the extra toes all around his feet is a little weird, but at least the toes were painted up pretty nicely. I could say the same for the claws, and even the palms of the hands. He's definitely not the sham buster I originally touted him as. But hey yo, for 25 bucks, I think OG release Shin Godzilla is pretty dang good. I'm gonna give him a solid star in terms of paint and detail, and now we can take a look at the reissue. And before we take a look at the reissue, I have to extend a hearty, loving thank you to Kaiju Dork, or Dorky Films, I believe he's now called. He is the reason I have the reissue of Shin Godzilla and the reissue of the Atomic Blast Shin Godzilla, so without their help, I would probably just be doing Shin Godzilla and Atomic Blast Shin Godzilla in the same video. Well, thank you, Alex. I really do appreciate you, and I guess I'm sorry for everything I'm about to say next. I might be a bit hypocritical here, but I really don't like how reissue Shin Godzilla looks in terms of paint. It looks like somebody dropped the gravy pot on Grandma's clean, white-tiled kitchen floors. Yeah, he's just too red. I mean, OG Shin Godzilla, he's got some of that red peeking through, like this kind of red, not the cracked red. Like, towards the thighs and a little bit on the body, you can kind of see the brownish red peeking through. But over here, it's just on full display, and yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Reissue Shin looks a little bit more like SH Monster Art Shin. But even then, I guess at least reissue Shin's little red lines are actually fucking visible, where SH Monster Arts is not. I don't know if this is exclusive to just what was once Alex's copy, or if this was just the funkin' vibe that NECA was going for with the Shin reissues. But again, it really ain't my favorite. He's still a bit goofy looking. The red peeking through the somewhat knotted and lava-looking flesh of Shin Godzilla is still very much appreciated. The details still shine something fierce, but again, he's just too red. And god, those dorsal fins. Not exactly one-to-one, but somewhat similar. I really don't know. The fading red to black on the original copy versus what just kind of feels like very basic application on the reissue copy. I don't know. Yeah, it really does feel like no matter what angle I'm looking at these things from, the OG just takes the cake in terms of paint. I don't believe I talked about the inside of the mouth or the teeth with the original version, so we'll get to that in a sec. But this is an aspect I think the reissue just did a little bit better. Shin Godzilla's mouth is comparable to that of a really bad highway accident. Things are just jutting out everywhere, and the reissue version, I think, communicates that better. It might be the lighter paint color used, it might be how they chose to do his lips or gums, whatever have you. OG Shin Godzilla kind of just looks like he's bleeding, which ain't exactly a bad thing, I guess. Let that not detract that a fully opened NECA Shin Godzilla mouth is somewhat nightmarish, and even though both of these guys are some wonky-eyed individuals and such, I gotta say, I think I like the inside of the mouths of NECA Shin pretty equally here, although reissue has that more look, while OG has that more lasagna look. The toe paint was done up a bit brighter, as were the claws over here, which is nice. The cheesy poof chunks are still at the tip of the tail for whatever reason, but they're a lot less brighter this go around. Reissue Shin Godzilla's back has a little bit more orange than red, giving off a bit more of a glowy vibe to him. And by all means, I don't hate this. I think this was a pretty fun way to tackle it, honestly. Again, I think I just really do prefer the original. The more red, the lighter hints of orange in there. Yeah, definitely prefer the original. So while I do very much prefer the original over the reissue, I can't say the reissue is painted up badly, it's just not to my liking. Honestly, if this guy's skin was a bit darker, this would definitely have taken the cake. He's still got his entire body highlighted with red for the most part. The detail is exquisite, and he still looks good. But yeah, original Shin's gonna move on to the articulation segment. One area I know for a fact that I forgot to talk about was the bottom of the tail, and the bottom of the tail has a lot. And it's not just like that on this version of the figure, it'll be like that on the reissue as well. It's just with the reissue, it's more red on top of a muddier, bloodier red, instead of just simply, charcoal black. Honestly, with all this bloody red paint application, it almost feels like NECA was trying to make a Shinagawa-kun figure. Which I don't hate. I definitely would have bought that for sure. Like I'm rather sure I said in my 2014 triple review, I like that we got different paint schemes per releases of NECA's Godzilla figures. I guess in just this comparison alone, I'm just more so favoring what I got first versus what I got second. So now that the best NECA Shin Godzilla has been chosen, we can get into the articulation segment of this video where this is where it's gonna get stupid, because I prefer the paint job of the original figure, but the articulation on the reissue, it's not as loose. I wouldn't say it's better because it's still a pain in the butt to pose, but it's better than that. And it has been like that since I got him out of the blister pack. Yay. As demonstrated before, opening and closing of the mouth. Ball joint at the head. Ah! Yeah, the head likes to pop off rather easily. Not an issue with the reissue. Can look down, about that far. Can look up, about that far. Ball joint at the neck. Down, up, swivel, all the way around. Rotation at the shoulders over here. Can bend out at the elbow over here, and then bend back in with a swivel. Swivel at the wrist. Hinge at the wrist as well. Shin Godzilla's ab crunch is a bit on the loose side, but at least I don't have to suffer as much as I would if I tried to do this with the reissue. Honestly, I'd rather his fucking head fall off than have to deal with this. The legs can move in and out just a little bit. The legs can also rotate all the way around, nice and smooth. We'll get a bend out at the knee and a nice bend in at the knee, nice and smooth. Oh boy, here we go. We'll get a, oh my god, a beautifully smooth rotation at the knee. We love it. I love it so much, I think I'll do it again. And then I'll do it again while the knee is bent. Oh my god. We'll get a ball joint at the ankle over here, which will give us some pivoting action. Nothing too crazy. And it can rotate. There we go. And now for the tail. Watch it drop the ball. The ball has been dropped. So we're going to get a ball joint at the base over here, which actually moves on this version versus the reissue. I'm not saying the reissue version doesn't have movement there. It's just really, really stiff. And yes, I have heated this up, and yes, I have soaked it in hot water, and no, it hasn't taken to it, just like GMK. We're going to have a ball joint over here, which is where the big letdown is. I mean, do we have a clip of my original review? Rob of the Future, include a clip of that.
Next we have the tail. This...
Oh yeah.
And it seems like the connection over here just ain't doing it, fam. I guess this was too big, or this was too small, or I don't know. But yeah, another ball joint, another ball joint, another ball joint, and then we have the bendy wire, which I'm pretty sure my version just never came with, because I think it's pretty much just always done this. Just kind of recoils frontwards and backwards no matter what. Ugh. So yeah, there's that. Articulation wasn't painful. It's loose in some areas. The bendy wire may as well not exist, so this is going to be a very weird instance in the NECAthon series. Because where this guy fails in being solid, this guy exceeds in that. But where this guy exceeds in being actually posable and not painful, this guy fails at that. Although he is still posable. So, half a star in terms of articulation, half a star in terms of articulation. Not because you don't get enough, but just because both of them are flawed to such an extent where I don't want to deal with them. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, how about size comparisons now? Sham Shin, Shokugan Shin, King of the Monsters series Shin, Marmot Shin, Movie Monster series Shin, NECA Atomic Blast reissue Shin, X Plus Defo Shin. I appreciate the fact that during NECA's big reissuing binge year, they were thinking of Shin Godzilla, they were thinking of pretty much everything they had released prior. They gave new and updated paint jobs to some, they fixed some articulation issues I've heard. But in terms of paint and NECA Shin Godzilla, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and this guy really didn't need all that much fixing, save for the articulation. I mean, just look at this. The tail only moves a little bit, and it's right here. It's almost like NECA overcorrected the problem with this guy. Don't even get me started on the leg rotation and the knee rotation on this guy. It is just nightmarish. Nightmare fuel. And no, just because it's Halloween doesn't mean I'm going to subject myself to that kind of pain. Well, that's about going to wrap it up for me, friends and neighbors. That's it. That's NECAthon 10.1. When next we meet, if I am not interrupted by that of a Hobby Link Japan shipment notification for the King of the Monsters series Godzilla -1 figure from Bandai, I believe it's the Lady Domitresk daughters, and then we're going to be doing NECAthon 10.2, which is going to be the NECA Shin Godzilla Atomic Blast figures, the original versus the reissue, just like this. Another big thank you to Kaiju Dork or Dorky Films for this very lovely donation, and hopefully things are just going to be looking up from here.